Today we're going to talk about something just a little bit different. I want to talk specifically to those of you who might consider yourself to be urban prepsteaders. What I mean by that is you might find yourself living in an apartment complex or a condominium or right in the heart of a city where you just don't have access to a yard. You don't have a garden and trees out back to use as a fuel source. But in the event of an emergency where you might have the lights go out, say, and you need an immediate source of energy, what are you going to do for your situation? It's worth talking through, so let's take the next few minutes and talk about that together. Whether by choice or not, you may be one of the ones that finds yourself in the heart of a city. And if that's the case, you may live in a condo or a high-rise apartment complex with absolutely no access to a garden or a back area where you have trees and such. But in the event that the electricity went out and it continued for any length of time, you would need to find a pretty quick source of energy to be able to heat water and keep yourself warm if it gets chilly at night. But let's talk a couple of things through. First of all, make a plan. I've already mentioned that it's the most important thing you can get from this. Start the conversation now. But you kind of want to start paying attention maybe for a whole month on exactly how much energy you use. What do you need water for? What do you need hot water for? What kind of meals do you cook? If you didn't have a microwave and you had to heat up meals, would you use the stove? And if you use the stove often, how often? The reason why it's important to know how often you normally cook with the stove would be because for each one of those little times that you turn the burner on, that would be the equivalent of what you would need to prepare for in an event where you need to make a little fire and warm up the water or the beans or whatever it is that you're cooking with. So start paying attention and maybe even just take a little clipboard. I have these small, wonderful little clipboards that I keep on hand, and I can make notes for myself of how often this month did I take a shower and need hot water, and how many minutes of hot water did I need. Then you can kind of find out, okay, how many gallons am I going through? How many times am I washing my hands? How many times am I cooking on the stove? I have a lot of hot teapots. Every day I have a couple of hot teapots worth of water I like to warm up. In the event that I don't have any electricity, what do I need to be satisfied and still have some semblance, of a normal living? Okay, so learn how much energy you're using and how much you need in an emergency situation. And then the next thing I would suggest is learn how to make a little hobo stove or rocket stove. I've seen so many videos on YouTube of that, and there are probably a huge number of different ways that you can do it, but it's the same principle, the same concept, and we'll do a video in the future of how I like to build one, but it's not something that you're ever going to really need until there's an emergency. And it's something you would really only need, in my opinion, if you were ending up being stranded in your own home right here, and that would be the value of it. Now, if you happen to have a fireplace like I do, be so thankful. That is going to save you a huge amount of trouble. But in the event that you don't have a fireplace, you need to already have a plan of, okay, where would I even vent the little fire that I would need to make? All of those things need talked through, but think through them and make a plan. One of the first things you need to identify is what are your fuel sources, because you're going to need to know. So think about this. Gasoline in our car, you probably need to know how to siphon it in the event that you needed that for something else. You also need to maybe have a small bit of gasoline stored. Having a small amount on hand, maybe a couple of gallons, is going to be beneficial, but it's not a long-term solution. But keep that in mind and know how to use it and how to store it. Next, sources of oil, like the oil for your vehicle or your lawnmower, oil for your oil lamps, kerosene. You might already have some on hand in a cupboard, but you probably don't have a huge amount stored. how long is that kerosene going to last? Especially if you're trying to use it for, say, a kerosene lamp to light everything with, but also you need it for cooking, to heat water. You're going to find it goes really, really fast. Trust me, I have learned the hard way. It goes through so much faster than you expect if you end up trying to rely on it entirely. Candles are great. They're wonderful for light, but they're hard to get enough heat just from one candle wick to heat quickly, but it does help. So you want to take stock of how many candles you have on hand. Also, just the cooking oil that you have in the cabinet for cooking with. You'll use it for cooking, but you'll also be able to use that for a fire if you needed to. It does put off some strange fumes, so it's not recommended. It's kind of a backup source. Also, obviously, if you have a little stack of firewood next to your fireplace, that's ideal. But if you don't have a fireplace, do you have a source of firewood? Do you know where the closest city park is, where there might be some tree limbs down? Do you know where other people store firewood that they might be willing to sell to you? And is it possible that you could get even a tiny stash of it, a few pieces of it that would be helpful to have on hand in your home? I promise it's worth it even if you don't have a fireplace. Next, once you've run out of those things, which you will go through those things if you're in an apartment or in an urban setting, what is the next thing that you're going to burn? You got to think through it. Okay, what is our plan? You could go outside to the city park and pick up the tree limbs and wood chips, like in a play area where they have wood chips, or in the mulch area, those wood chips can sometimes be burned, so that's good. Also, if you have wooden boxes around the house that you store things in, I have a lot of antique wooden boxes that probably would be one of the first things that I burned if I needed to. Picture frames. A lot of us have stored picture frames in back closets that don't even have pictures in them. Yes, that's treated wood, but in an emergency situation, you'd be thankful for it. I've got oak cabinetry, and if I had to in an emergency, those could come in handy. I could burn the cabinet doors, and then I could burn the furniture very last. Also, baskets and things like that in the house. You need to think through this, and as absurd as it sounds, kind of know your plan so that it doesn't take you off guard and doesn't create chaos instead of a calm if the emergency arose and you had to do this. Now, for those of you who do live in an urban setting, I do want to encourage you a couple of things that you can do proactively. One thing is this: Craigslist is your friend. Craigslist has this wonderful section that is called free, and one of the most common things that they have for free on Craigslist is firewood. The reason being is, especially in the spring and in the summer and fall, when those storms come through and knock down someone's tree locally, they're going to say, hey, free firewood, if you want to come and pick it up, it's all yours. Well, I don't care what kind of vehicle you have. It might be a luxury vehicle, it might be a little tiny car, but I'll bet you have room for a few pieces of firewood if you could just look that Craigslist ad up, run by there and pick those up some afternoon. Nextly, or I have been told by several of you that's not a word, so I'll try not to use the word nextly, but the next thing would be pallet wood. Now, you can store pallets and make them into wonderful craft projects, but they're also excellent sources of firewood in the event that you needed to burn things. And you can break them down and have a nice, very organized little pile of wood if you needed to break down those pallets. There is an important thing you need to know, though, about identifying them. So take a look just for a minute as we look at some. So once you've found the pallets that are going to be given away on Craigslist, you might want to just save yourself a trip by calling first if you can and ask them, hey, are you somebody that collects pallets? You use them for furniture and then just get rid of the ones that you don't need? If that's the kind of pallets you're picking up, most likely they already know what I'm going to tell you next, and they've gotten rid of the ones that are unusable. What you want is to find a supplier for pallets that's kind of to the source, if you know what I mean. Back up the chain a little bit, because you need to be able to sort out which ones are good to be able to use and which ones are not. Here's how you tell. Now, the National Plant Protection Organization has made it so that it is voluntary, as far as I know. It might be required now, but I think it's voluntary for companies to be able to label their pallets, whether they have been heat treated or treated with chemicals to get the wood nice and usable. Now, this particular one is heat treated. That's what you want. Yes, it has some paint on the back. This is at Walmart where we are, where they like to paint their pallets blue. But what you're looking for is this nice little mark on the side that says HT. It's going to have some other numbers and letters and such. It always is going to start with a 2-digit letters that's going to signify what country it originated from. And I think this one is Mexico since it says MX. It's going to say HT for heat treated, or MB, which means methyl bromide treated. That's bad. You do not want that. In fact, you really don't want any pallets that have been used treated with the methyl bromide, or if they're just oily or look like they've had chemical spills on them, that's going to be a bad thing. You don't want to use those for any kind of building of even dog houses or furniture or all the different pallet wood projects we make. It's really important that you know the difference, because there are a lot of chemicals in those that are going to leach out and be very bad for you or anyone who's touching or tasting any of that wood. If there are no markings at all on the pallet, just absolutely nix it off your list. It's not worth the risk. More than likely, it's processed with methyl bromide or some other chemical. But if it says HT like these, you know the only thing it's had is just some good heat added to it to get it ready to use. That's what we want to collect for an emergency. So now you know about free firewood on Craigslist, free pallet wood, which is a wonderful source, but also many restaurants give away their used cooking oil, and that can put off some toxic fumes in your home, so you want to have a plan for how to exhaust that out of the home through a window or such. But you can pick some of that up, and it also can be used in other things like running a diesel car and things like that in an emergency. I hope that you don't have to, but it's good to know about those sources and establish the relationships right now on the front end before the crisis would happen, where everybody wants the same source of fuel given to them. Okay, I know we haven't covered everything, but I think that you've gotten the idea. Plan ahead, because right now those little tiny bundles of about 4 pieces of firewood that you can get down at the grocery store for about $6, it's ridiculous what they can charge you for it, but imagine in an emergency how the price of those would skyrocket and they'd be gone in a minute. So now is the time to prepare for what is your plan if the electricity were turned off and you needed a source of fuel. Just food for thought. I hope you urban prepsteaders will comment below, share this video with someone you love, and let us know other things that we haven't even mentioned, because I am sure I have not mentioned all of the things that you might want to think about in that situation. Until I see you again, thank you for joining us. Please like and subscribe and hit that little bell, and go out and be a blessing to someone else today. Hey, before you go, I've got to share this out of Isaiah chapter 43, verses 18 and 19. Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing, and now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Now go spread the word.